A real crime. In a series of podcasts, I want you to travel down some lonely roads with me. These are the roads I traveled with families who never got to say goodbye to loved ones. These family members were fated to live the rest of their lives waiting and wondering. I will begin this series with unsolved murders, but I will also revisit cases that include arrests because aspects of the case are worth re-examining. I wrote these stories when I worked as a reporter for the Charleston Gazette. Once again, thanks for joining me today. I also appreciate you listening to my episodes on deadly child abuse. I know those episodes were not easy to listen to, but I think the subject is so important. Today, I'm exploring another difficult subject, domestic violence. Episode 18, Till Death Us Do Part. In my years as a newspaper reporter, the police scanner was always on in the newsroom. We frequently heard a dispatcher say, "It's a domestic." Those few words meant volumes to me. I always believed it also meant that whoever got the call did not take it seriously. We believe that the people we marry should never be the ones to harm us, but what we call intimate partner violence too often turns deadly. I knew the victim in this case from the time she was a child. With blonde hair, Carolyn Hickman Woodrum grew into a beautiful woman who was chosen as a beauty queen for her sorority. When I reviewed the original story I wrote about this case, I was stunned again to think she was only 29 when her husband shot her to death. On an anniversary of her death, I interviewed her best friend, Kathy Adkins of Oak Hill. Both Kathy and Carolyn married about the same time, and each woman had a daughter. The two friends saw each other almost daily. Their families spent weekends and vacations together. To look at them out in public as a family, you'd think that's how I want my life to be, Adkins said. But the Woodrums also had a secret life. Jimmy Woodrum beat his wife viciously from the beginning of their 13-year marriage. Carolyn dropped out of high school at age 16 to marry the man who was 5 years older. When she discovered she was pregnant with their only child, her husband beat her and locked her in a closet. Even though they spent so much time together, Adkins had no idea about this secret life. Carolyn lied about her bruises. After Adkins learned about the beatings, she and Carolyn talked in code. "I guess you and I can go shopping in about a week," Adkins would say. That would represent her estimate of Carolyn's healing time. She said Carolyn replied, "I have some good makeup." When Carolyn talked about the beatings, Adkins said Carolyn would say, "I'm embarrassed. It hurts." Adkins said she was overwhelmed as she tried to understand when Carolyn told her about the pain. Jimmy could be the nicest guy in the world. He'd do anything for you. Call him at 3 a.m. in a snowdrift and he'd come and get you. In public, he never uttered a harsh word. Adkins said, at times, I'd even think he couldn't do it. He could charm you. He could make you think he was so sincere. I think when he was sane, he was. At other times, Carolyn always paid if somebody else made Jimmy feel bad, if he had a hard day at work, if the phone bill was too high, if she was not at home to start dinner for him. Adkins remembered her friend as full of life. She was never mean to anyone. She saw too much good in people. I think, in fact, that's why she's not alive today. She just couldn't believe anyone could hurt someone else. Just knowing her changed my life forever, and losing her changed my life immeasurably. She was too good to die, her friend said. Carolyn had little self-confidence. Her husband made her feel worse by making fun of her. I think Carolyn was afraid to be on her own. I think she was saying to Jimmy, "I'll stand here and you abuse me, but don't throw me out on my own." About 2 months before he killed his wife, Jimmy burned all of her clothes and some personal belongings in their front yard. The blaze was big enough that the fire department had to be called out to put it out. In the split-level home that Carolyn and Jimmy built together, Woodrum beat his wife so badly that she leaped from the second-story bedroom to escape him. Adkins said a neighbor called her and told her Carolyn was taken to the hospital. I beat the ambulance to the hospital. I was still waiting for Carolyn when the attendants wheeled this woman past me. I didn't recognize her. She was beaten so badly. She could not see out of either eye. A state trooper asked Adkins to try to talk Carolyn into taking out a warrant for her husband. Adkins believed that Carolyn was not ready to take an official step to end the abuse. She still believed she could stop him without going outside the circle of family and friends. After Carolyn jumped out of the window, Jimmy checked himself into a Charleston psychiatric facility. About a month before he killed his wife, he checked himself out. When she got some confidence, that's when the end came, Adkins told me. Carolyn grew up. She got a mind of her own. That's when Jimmy found it really hard to deal with. He still wanted to be married to a 16-year-old that he had all this power over. That's when it had to end for Jimmy. Carolyn filed for divorce. Adkins believed that Woodrum became irrational. She took Carolyn into her home, and Woodrum began to threaten her and her family too. The only time Carolyn did turn to the court, she went to magistrate's court. But her husband was hiding near the office. He jumped out at her and almost killed her in broad daylight. A man who saw the attack pulled Woodrum off and prevented him from choking her to death. Adkins thinks that Carolyn still did not realize how much danger she was in. She thought he was mad and would get over it. On the last night of Carolyn's life, people saw them talking at a gas station in Oak Hill. She drove away in her car. He drove away in his truck. They both drove down winding Gatewood Road. At about 2 a.m., a couple who lived on Gatewood Road called the police after they heard a vehicle bump into the guardrail in front of their house. They could also hear voices raised in anger. Trooper Tom Ballard said he and another trooper expected to find a routine accident, but the other trooper cautioned him to be careful after they found an empty gun holster in the truck. In the dark, near the house, Ballard soon found 2 bodies, one still alive. Carolyn was lying face down. She suffered 3 shots to the head, 1 to the back, 1 to her left arm. A bullet grazed the right side of her beauty queen face. Ballard found no evidence of a struggle. He ran her down to kill her, the trooper said. Woodrum shot himself in the head. He was rushed to the hospital, and 2 weeks later he would die from this self-inflicted wound. On his death certificate in Fayette County Circuit Court, he was listed as a widower. For years after, Adkins still mourned for her friend. She and her husband would leave town on the anniversary of Carolyn's death. I never turned my back on her. There were times she'd call me. I'd pick her up at 3 a.m. with my headlights off. I was afraid of Jimmy seeing me. During the hundreds of times she reflected on Carolyn's death and on her loss, her anger has taken different directions. She said she's also felt anger at the judicial system. After Carolyn was murdered, a group of people protested publicly. They believed that the magistrates failed to tell Carolyn about her options for protective orders. Several people also formed groups after her death to help others learn what options they could take to escape violence in their homes. Advocates for victims of domestic violence explain that when a person decides to leave a violent partner, that is a dangerous time. Advocates also believe the partner who is leaving must have a safety plan. Once Carolyn made up her mind to leave, she was in grave danger. She had few resources to help her. Thanks to you for listening, and to Tommy Siner for his always great work. Please listen next Wednesday to another episode of A Real Crime by Susan Williams.